Thanks for sticking to the end. My name is Scott Eustis. I'm the Community Science Director of Gulf Restoration Network, and along with Grace, I'm speaking against the rezoning of the wetland sites in Planning District 11 to industrial. We asked the council to consider the CPT's January recommendation, which was to deny the rezoning from general use and natural areas to industrial for the reasons of public safety and flood protection. The January recommendation we feel is the correct one. There was an additional vote in July that did not have all the information. The city staff continued to recommend that changing these wetland sites to industrial. They recommended against the state master plan. The state of Louisiana says that you shouldn't develop wetlands behind levees. The federal plans to restore this area for flood protection, they state pretty clearly you shouldn't be placing this additional water from these wetlands onto residential areas like New Orleans East. In the July meeting, there was some question of whether not these sites were wetlands. A wetland scientist like me is pretty obvious. You can canoe across both sites, no problem. There are cypress trees, there's duckweed, there are fish and egrets. It's a tremendous amount of water. During that July vote, though, that question wasn't it was still something of a question, not in my mind, but perhaps in the port's. But we have done a records request, and the port did know that these areas were delineated wetlands, and they have been since 2004 when they have tried to develop them in the past. So we feel that July vote was invalid because all parties did not have this information. So we feel that the January CPC vote to deny changing these wetlands and filling them with an industry, that's the recommendation that should be followed. Industrial zoning implies feet. I mean, zoning is not going to stop the permit application. In fact, I mean, this permit application used less than 40% of the wetland property in New Orleans East. So you probably could move forward. This was a power plant that was envisioned in 2004. So this probably, it's my understanding that this would be allowed under general use since there is that 60% open space requirement. But that's an incredible amount of fill. That would put it's millions of cubic yards of rock to get, things that are full of oil and shouldn't be leaking into the water out of the wetlands. That puts an incredible, all of that water is displaced then and gets placed into the drainage system in New Orleans East. So it would be tens of millions of gallons. It would be similar to taking one of the drainage canals and reducing its width by half. Or, in the paper today, there's a picture of a woman who put a rain barrel on her house. This amount of fill, just this, which still would probably comply with general use zoning, less than 40% of the property. The amount of fill here, that would displace enough water. You couldn't recapture that with 1 million rain barrels. I don't think there's that many residences in New Orleans East. So it's, we have the residents of New Orleans and New Orleans East are doing their part. We know the port can do better. We've seen the port do very well. We know in the past the port wanted to develop these areas as mitigation sites. We would like to continue to work with them toward that end because we do think that these sites have a valuable role in the maritime commerce of our city, but with a lighter footprint and a more appropriate footprint that enables us to have public safety, enables us to have a well-maintained flood protection system, both the levees, which are adjacent to these properties, as well as the pumping system in New Orleans East. So again, we ask that the zoning change for the Paris and Aurora properties in Planning Unit 11 that change from general use and natural area, both to industrial, we ask that those changes be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eustis. Saira